He found a trembling wolf pup, abandoned in the freezing forest. Their eyes met in a connection that would defy the laws of nature. What started as a simple rescue transformed into an extraordinary journey of compassion, sacrifice, and freedom. Between sleepless nights and relentless criticism, an impossible bond changed two lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Can we imagine the exact moment our lives change completely? That instant suspended in time, when the universe conspires to place something on our path that will transform everything we know. That's how it was, on a freezing autumn morning in Minnesota, with the sky painted in shades of gray and the forest silent under a blanket of frozen dew, that something extraordinary happened. The biting wind whispered through the ancient pines, as Michael walked with careful steps over a carpet of dry leaves. A nature photographer for over 30 years, his trained eyes captured every detail of that silent symphony the forest offered. Every drop of dew, every ray of sun that managed to penetrate the dense tree canopy, every stealthy movement of the small inhabitants of that natural sanctuary. He sought solitude. He sought silence. He sought reconnection after years documenting the wild beauty of the world. Always behind a lens, always distant, always observing. His cabin on the edge of the forest was his refuge, a place where the world's expectations couldn't reach him, where phones didn't ring incessantly, where editors didn't demand impossible deadlines. That's when he heard it. A sound almost imperceptible, easily mistaken for the wind whispering through the leaves, but one that broke the natural harmony of the environment, a weak, trembling, desperate cry. Michael stopped, adjusting his senses to pinpoint the direction of the lament. A few steps ahead, behind a fallen log covered in moss, the answer to that mystery awaited him. And there he was, small, fragile, trembling violently, with blue eyes half closed by weakness. A wolf pup, no more than a few weeks old, abandoned to his fate in that unforgiving forest. Eyes that, despite the evident fear, held Michael's gaze with a disturbing intensity. It was as if those two souls, so different and yet so similar, recognized something in each other. A shared solitude, a silent resilience. "Where's your mother, little one?" Michael whispered, knowing he wouldn't get an answer but feeling the need to break the silence heavy with meaning. He knew what he should do. 30 years photographing wildlife had taught him nature's most fundamental principle: don't interfere. Don't disturb the delicate balance that sustains life and death in the forests. But something in those blue eyes challenged all his principles. Something in that helpless creature spoke directly to his heart, an organ he believed he had silenced years ago in the name of professional objectivity. The next few minutes unfolded in a careful dance. Michael scanned the area for signs of the mother wolf or other pack members. Nothing. Just silence and the growing certainty that the pup had been abandoned or worse, had lost his family to illegal poachers who still operated in the region. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Shadows lengthened, and the temperature began to drop even further. The night would be merciless, and Michael knew with painful certainty that the pup wouldn't survive until dawn. It was at that moment, with the setting sun casting golden rays through the trees, that Michael made a decision that would completely alter the course of his existence. Removing his heavy coat, he slowly approached the pup, who tried, unsuccessfully, to back away with a weak growl. "I know, little one, I know," he murmured, carefully wrapping the animal in the warm fabric. "But I have to take you with me, just for today, just until we can find help." The pup didn't resist, perhaps from weakness, perhaps from some primitive instinct that told him this human represented his only chance of survival. His blue eyes fixed on Michael with an expression that seemed to mix fear and gratitude, a combination the photographer would have sworn was impossible in a wild animal. The path back to the cabin felt endless. Each step was taken with extra care, every movement calculated not to disturb the small creature now trembling against his chest. Michael could feel the pup's heart beating frantically, a desperate percussion against the slower rhythm of his own heart. The cabin finally appeared between the trees, a modest wooden structure with smoke rising from the chimney, a promise of warmth and safety. Michael had left the fire burning before he left, a precaution against the harsh cold that descended from the mountains at that time of year. Crossing the threshold, a disquieting reality hit him. What would he do now? Knowledge of wolves came from observing from a distance, from photographs taken from carefully positioned hides. He had never been this close, this personally involved. He had never taken direct responsibility for a wild creature. Michael placed the trembling bundle on a blanket near the fireplace. The pup, now under the flickering firelight, revealed himself to be even more fragile than he had seemed in the forest. His gray fur was matted and dirty, his prominent ribs betraying days, perhaps weeks of hunger. His eyes, however, those same intense blue eyes that had captured the photographer's soul that first morning in the forest, remained unchanged, windows to a wild intelligence that both fascinated and intimidated him. The next few hours turned into a race against time. Michael heated milk, following instincts more than knowledge. He searched his limited library for information on caring for wild pups. He tried, without success, to contact the Forest Service via his satellite phone. The approaching storm blocked the signal, isolating them even further in that remote refuge. When night finally enveloped the forest in its dark cloak, and snow began to fall in thick flakes, Michael found himself sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, watching the small wolf who, miraculously, had accepted a few spoonfuls of warm milk mixed with egg yolk, a recipe his grandmother used for orphaned farm pups. "You need a name," he said, breaking the silence that filled the cabin. "You can't just be pup or wolf." The animal slightly raised his head, as if understanding he was being addressed. "Spirit," Michael decided after a few moments, "because that's what you are, a spirit of the forest. And because, according to the Ojibwe people who inhabited these lands long before us, wolves are spirit guides, messengers between worlds. And so, under the crackling of the wood in the fireplace and the whistling of the wind now howling around the cabin, an unlikely alliance was born between a man seeking isolation and a pup desperately needing connection. An alliance that neither of them could predict how deeply it would transform their existences. The first few days were a delicate dance between hope and despair. Spirit refused to eat regularly, hiding in the darkest corners of the cabin whenever Michael approached. A fever came on the third night, a crisis that kept the photographer awake until dawn, applying cold compresses to the small trembling body, whispering words of encouragement that he knew the pup didn't understand, but which somehow seemed to soothe him. It was during that endless vigil, watching Spirit's silent fight against death, that Michael realized how empty his own life had become. Years recording the world's beauty through a lens, but never truly being a part of it. Always an observer, never a participant. Recording the drama of wildlife with clinical objectivity, but never allowing himself to truly feel the raw emotion of existence. "We're going to get through this, Spirit," he promised as the first lights of dawn filtered through the fogged windows. "Both of us. Together." As if responding to that promise made with the heart more than with reason, the fever broke. Spirit opened his blue eyes, now clearer and more alert than ever. And for the first time since he had arrived at the cabin, he voluntarily licked Michael's hand. That small gesture, so insignificant to any observer, marked the beginning of a transformation. A wall had been torn down, a bridge built, a connection established. Days turned into weeks, and weeks began to accumulate into months. The snow covering the forest melted and reappeared several times, marking the passage of time in that isolated world, where only man and wolf existed in an increasingly deep harmony. Spirit grew visibly. His previously fragile body gained strength and definition. His fur, once dull and matted, now shone under the sunlight when Michael took him for short expeditions around the cabin. His eyes, however, those same blue eyes that had captured the photographer's soul that first morning in the forest, remained unchanged, windows to a wild intelligence that both fascinated and intimidated. The routine established between them was both structured and fluid. They woke with the sun, shared meals adapted to both their needs, explored the surroundings with increasing care as Spirit became stronger and more confident. At night, they sat before the fireplace, man and wolf, each absorbed in their own thoughts but somehow deeply connected in a comfortable silence that neither felt the need to break. It was during one of these moments of shared quiet that Michael realized he hadn't taken a single photograph in months. His camera, once an extension of his own body, lay forgotten in his bag, covered by a thin layer of dust. The realization hit him like a wave. He didn't miss it. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel the need to capture moments on film or pixels. He was too busy living them. His phone rang that night, the first contact with the outside world in weeks. It was his editor, a voice from the past that sounded strangely dissonant in the small universe. Michael had built with spirit. "Where the heck have you been, Michael? We have deadlines. The exhibition in New York is in 3 months and you haven't sent a single new photo." The exasperated voice on the other end of the line seemed to come from another planet, from another life that Michael barely recognized as his own. A life of impersonal hotels, endless flights, sterile meetings with executives who saw nature as a commodity, beauty as a product. "I can't right now, Robert," he simply replied, watching Spirit, who had raised his head at the sound of the strange voice, ears alert, eyes fixed on Michael with an expression that seemed to question the intrusion. "I'm in the middle of something important." "Important? More important than your career? More important than the contract it took you 15 years to get? Have you completely lost your mind, man?" Michael looked at Spirit, at those eyes that had become his mirror, his conscience, his connection to something greater than he himself had ever been able to name. And the answer came naturally, without hesitation, without remorse. Yes, much more important. The call ended in a whirlwind of threats and ultimatums. His contract would be terminated, his reputation ruined, his photographs removed from the exhibition, his legacy erased. Strangely, as he hung up the phone and set it aside, possibly not to be used again for a long time, Michael felt a peace he hadn't experienced since his youth. As if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. As if, in losing everything he had once considered important, he had finally found what truly mattered. "It's just us now, Spirit," he said, extending his hand to the wolf who, surprisingly, approached and rested his head on his knee, a gesture of intimacy that still surprised him. "And you know what? This is more than enough." But the world, as always, refused to remain at a distance. On a particularly cold morning, as Michael returned from his morning walk to gather firewood, he spotted a vehicle approaching on the almost impassable road leading to his cabin, an official Forest Service jeep advancing slowly through the snowdrifts. His heart pounded. For months he had protected Spirit not only from the cold and predators, but also from the eyes of the law. He knew perfectly well that sheltering a wild wolf, a protected species without the proper permits, was illegal. It could result in astronomical fines, even imprisonment. More devastating still, it could mean separation from Spirit, whom he now considered not a pet, but an equal, a companion, a friend in the deepest sense of the word. "Stay here," he whispered to the wolf, who watched the window with suspicion, sensing the tension in the air. "Don't make a sound." The jeep parked, and a woman got out. Tall, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing the dark green Forest Service uniform and carrying a clipboard. Her steps were decisive. Her eyes scanned the cabin and surroundings with a professional gaze trained to detect irregularities. "Mr. Almeida? Michael Almeida?" she called, knocking firmly on the door. Michael opened it, forcing himself to appear casual, unconcerned, ignoring the fact that his heart was pounding so hard he feared she could hear it. "That's me. How can I help you?" "Dr. Helen Carter, lead biologist for the Forest Service in this region," she introduced herself, extending a gloved hand that Michael automatically shook. "Can we talk inside? It's freezing out here." Before he could invent an excuse, she had already stepped past him, entering the warm cabin. Michael closed his eyes briefly, preparing for the inevitable, for the end of everything. But as he turned, he found not the disaster he expected, but a scene he would never forget. Spirit, normally so wary of strangers, was sitting calmly before the visitor, who had knelt down, and was observing him not with horror or indignation, but with something that looked like professional admiration. "Extraordinary," she murmured, maintaining a respectful distance but observing every detail of the animal with trained eyes. "How many months old would you estimate he is?" Michael, momentarily speechless, finally found his voice. 6, maybe 7. I found him abandoned in the forest 4 months ago." Helen nodded, without taking her eyes off Spirit, who watched her, with the same calculating intensity. "And you've cared for him alone all this time? Without specialized training? Without veterinary assistance?" "I consulted some books, used common sense, did the best I could," he replied defensively, preparing for the reprimand, for the accusations of irresponsible interference, for the legal citation that would surely follow. Instead, Helen slowly stood up and met his gaze with what seemed to be genuine respect. "What you've achieved here is remarkable, Mr. Almeida. This wolf should be dead, or at best completely dependent on humans and incapable of returning to the wild. Yet, he is healthy, obviously well-fed, and, most importantly, has maintained his wild essence. He doesn't behave like a domesticated dog. He behaves like a wolf." "Spirit," Michael corrected automatically. "His name is Spirit." Helen smiled for the first time, a smile that softened the severe lines of her face. Spirit, an appropriate name. She seemed to weigh her next words carefully. "Mr. Almeida, I came here today because we received reports of a possible wolf being held in captivity. I came prepared to confiscate a mistreated animal and press charges against a lawbreaker." Michael swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the fear he had carried for months. "Instead," she continued, "I found something I thought was impossible, a symbiotic relationship between man and wolf that hasn't compromised the essential nature of either." She paused, watching Spirit, who had returned to near the fireplace and was observing the conversation with those penetrating blue eyes. "What do you intend to do with him long term?" The question hit Michael with devastating force. It was something he had been avoiding thinking about, although he knew, in the depths of his soul, that the day would come. Spirit was not a dog. He was not a pet. He was a creature born to run free, to hunt, to live in a pack. "I don't know," he finally admitted, feeling the weight of that truth. "I just know I can't just abandon him. I can't imagine." "I have a proposal," Helen interrupted, her professional tone returning. "A proposal that could benefit not only Spirit, but potentially the entire wolf population in this region." And so, on a winter morning that had begun with fear, a new possibility was born. A gradual rehabilitation program, supervised by Helen and her team, that would prepare Spirit for eventual reintroduction into the wild. A program that would allow Michael to remain involved, document the process, become part of something larger than his personal pain of separation. "It won't be easy," Helen warned as she prepared to leave, hours later after outlining the details of the plan. "For you or for him, there will be times when you doubt, times when you'll want to give up, times when the love you feel for him will directly conflict with what is best for his wild nature." Michael nodded, knowing she was right, feeling the weight of that truth like a stone in his chest, but also feeling, paradoxically, a new lightness, a purpose, a path. "I understand," he simply replied, "but I'll do whatever it takes. For him." Helen smiled again, that smile that transformed her austere face into something almost maternal. "I know you will, Mr. Almeida. That's why I'm willing to risk my own career on this unconventional project." She looked at Spirit one last time. "Some would say it's madness that we're projecting human emotions onto a predator. But looking at the two of you, well, maybe some connections transcend species barriers." When the Jeep disappeared around the bend in the road, Michael went back inside, feeling inexplicably exhausted and invigorated at the same time. Spirit came to meet him, rubbing lightly against his leg, a gesture he reserved only for their most intimate moments. "Things are going to change, buddy," he said, kneeling down to look directly into those eyes that had become his mirror. "But I promise I'll be with you every step of the way. I promise I'll never abandon you like they did before." And that night, As the snow fell softly outside, isolating them from the world once more, Michael picked up his forgotten camera. He, carefully, almost reverently, wiped away the dust. He adjusted the settings, and for the first time in months he began to photograph. But this time, it was different. He wasn't capturing nature from afar as a distant observer. He was documenting his own journey within it, his own transformation from observer to participant, from solitary to connected, from lost to found. Spring arrived in the forest with an explosion of new life. The snow melted, revealing the still dormant ground. Green shoots emerged everywhere, promising renewal after the long winter. It was as if nature itself reflected the transformation taking place in the small cabin on the edge of the woods. The outdoor enclosure that Helen had helped build for Spirit was finally complete. A spacious structure extending from the cabin to the forest edge, offering the wolf, who was now almost fully grown, space to run, explore, and gradually reconnect with his natural environment, all under the watchful eyes of Michael and the team of biologists who now visited regularly. "His progression is remarkable," Helen commented on a particularly warm afternoon, watching as Spirit chased a small rodent among the bushes in the enclosure. His behavior was purely instinctive, the hunting posture perfect for a wolf, without any of the acquired mannerisms that animals raised by humans typically develop. He's kept his wild essence intact. Michael, who was photographing the scene from a respectful distance, lowered his camera and smiled. "He was never really mine, you know. I think I always knew that. From the first day when our eyes met in the forest, I understood that he was just temporarily in my care, that he belonged to something bigger." Helen nodded, a flicker of approval in her usually severe eyes. "That's why this is working, Michael. Because you understand what few humans can grasp. That truly loving something wild means accepting its nature, not trying to change it to suit our needs." Her words touched something deep within Michael, a truth he had been gradually unearthing during those months with Spirit. A lesson about love, freedom, and the painful beauty of letting go. The plan progressed in carefully calculated phases. First, gradually reducing human contact with Spirit, a gentle but necessary separation that hurt Michael more than he would ever admit aloud. Then, introducing live prey into the enclosure, allowing the wolf to develop and refine his natural hunting skills, finally. And this was the step that terrified Michael the most, preparing Spirit for eventual reintroduction into a wild pack that had been identified a few miles away. "There's a small group, just 5 wolves, that recently lost a member," Helen explained during one of the planning sessions. "It's a rare opportunity. Packs rarely accept outsiders, but the dynamics of this specific group and Spirit's age increase the chances of acceptance." "What if they reject him?" Michael asked, his voice slightly trembling, betraying the fear he tried to keep under control. "What if they attack him?" Helen didn't offer false assurances. It wasn't her style. "It's a risk, a significant risk. But the alternative is keeping him in an artificial limbo forever, neither truly domesticated nor truly wild. Would that be a life for him?" The answer was obvious, as much as it hurt to admit. It wouldn't be life. It would be existence. And Spirit, with his fierce intelligence and untouched dignity, deserved more than just existing. He deserved to live fully as the magnificent creature he was meant to be. The news came unexpectedly, through a call from the Forest Service's communication department. A documentary production company had heard about the unconventional project involving Spirit and was interested in documenting the rehabilitation and reintroduction process, an opportunity not only to record the journey for posterity, but also to educate the public about conservation, coexistence, and the delicate balance of forest ecosystems. "Normally, I would refuse immediately," Helen confessed. "Media exposure usually complicates sensitive projects like this, but this production company has a solid history of responsible, scientifically accurate documentaries. And frankly, we need public awareness. Wolves are still persecuted, still misunderstood." Michael, who would once have avoided the spotlight at all costs, found himself reluctantly agreeing. If Spirit's story could change perceptions, save other wild lives, create understanding where there was once fear, then it was worth telling. Filming began discreetly, with a small crew maintaining a respectful distance, strictly following the protocols established by Helen to minimize disturbance to Spirit. The wolf, now fully grown, with his magnificent silver-gray coat and those same penetrating blue eyes, had become even more impressive. His presence commanded attention, respect, even reverence. "I've never seen anything like it," the documentary director commented after the first day of filming. "The way he looks at you, it's like there's a conversation happening that the rest of us can't hear." Michael smiled, but didn't try to explain. How could he? How could he put into words the silent communication that had developed between him and Spirit over those months? A language without words, made of glances, subtle movements, mutual understanding. Autumn returned to the forest, marking a full year since that first fateful morning when Michael had found a dying pup behind a fallen log. A year of growth, learning, transformation. A year that had changed everything. The date everyone feared and anticipated finally arrived. The day of the first attempted approach with the wild pack. A temporary enclosure was built on the periphery of the group's territory, allowing Spirit and the wild wolves to observe each other, scent each other, assess each other through the barriers. Michael didn't sleep the night before. How could he? Every cell in his body seemed to vibrate with a toxic mix of hope and terror. Hope that Spirit would find his place, his purpose, his true existence. Terror of losing the creature who had become such a fundamental part of his own soul. Morning arrived, gray and cold, mirroring the mood of everyone involved. The Forest Service team moved with silent efficiency, checking equipment, confirming positions, preparing for all contingencies. The film crew kept their distance, capturing the historic moment without interfering. And then, the moment Michael both feared and yearned for. Time to take Spirit to the transition enclosure. Time to begin the process of final separation. "You have a few minutes alone with him," Helen said softly, understanding the emotional magnitude of the moment. "We know this isn't just science for you. We know what he means." Michael walked slowly to the enclosure where Spirit waited, as if sensing the importance of the moment. The wolf immediately rose, approaching the fence with that feline grace that had always characterized him. His blue eyes, wiser and deeper than they had ever been, fixed on Michael's. "It's time, buddy," he whispered, kneeling down to be at Spirit's eye level. "Time for you to find your true home, your true purpose." The wolf slightly tilted his head, as he always did when he seemed to absorb Michael's words. A gesture so familiar, so intimate, that it made the photographer's heart ache. Painfully. "I'll never forget you," he continued, his voice choked with emotion he could no longer contain. "I'll never forget what you taught me about connection, about belonging, about love without conditions or expectations. You saved my life as much as I saved yours." Spirit came closer, pressing his muzzle against the fence that separated them. Michael reached out, gently touching the thick fur, feeling the warmth of the powerful body under his fingers. One last touch, one last moment of connection. "Go, be free. Be what you were born to be," he whispered, finally allowing the tears to flow freely. "And know that wherever you go, a part of me goes with you." As if understanding the depth of that goodbye, Spirit emitted a soft sound, almost a whimper, that resonated through Michael's body like a wave. A sound that seemed to capture all the complexity of that moment. Gratitude, sadness, hope, promise. Helen approached silently, signaling that it was time. Michael stood up, wiping away his tears without shame, and nodded. It was time to time to complete the circle that had begun a year ago, when two solitaries met in the vastness of the forest. The first week of approach was tense. The wild pack kept its distance, watching the stranger with evident suspicion. Spirit, in turn, alternated between attempts at communication and moments of apparent desolation that tore at Michael's heart, observing everything from afar through binoculars and the images transmitted by cameras installed around the enclosure. "This is normal," Helen reassured him repeatedly, although Michael could see the concern in her eyes. Integration is never immediate. It's a process. Take two also began to surface, coming from certain sectors of the conservation community who questioned the approach. "This wolf will never truly be wild," declared a renowned expert in a devastating article. "The damage caused by human intervention is irreversible. This experiment is doomed to fail, and worse, could compromise the integrity of the wild pack." Michael, who in the past would have recoiled from such controversy, found himself defending the project with fierce eloquence. His camera, previously used to capture beauty from a distance, had now become a tool of defense. His photographs of Spirit, showing purely lupine behaviors, became powerful evidence against the critics. His testimony, from the one who knew the wolf most intimately, carried weight. Then, in the third week when hope was beginning to fade, something extraordinary happened. The pack's alpha female, a wolf with dark fur and an imposing stature, approached the enclosure where Spirit was, alone, not with the defensive aggression of previous days, but with cautious curiosity. Michael, Helen, and the entire team watched with bated breath as the two wolves studied each other through the fence. A moment of silent communication, an exchange of something no human present could fully understand. "Incredible," Helen whispered, her professionalism momentarily eclipsed by awe. "This is acceptance," Michael completed, feeling an indescribable mix of joy and sadness expanding in his chest. She's accepting him. In the following days, other pack members followed the alpha female's lead, approaching the enclosure, interacting with Spirit in increasingly less hostile ways. Their body language changed. Their vocalizations took on new tones. It was happening, more quickly and completely than any of the experts had dared to hope. "It's time," Helen finally declared after a tense meeting with her team. "All behavioral metrics indicate that it's the moment. Spirit is ready. The pack is receptive. If we wait too long, we could miss this window of opportunity." The big day dawned clear and cold. An almost sacred silence hung over the forest, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation. All preparations had been made. The temporary enclosure would be opened, allowing Spirit to leave when he was ready. A non-invasive tracking collar had been placed, allowing the team to monitor his movements and condition in the following weeks. Michael, whose heart felt like it was simultaneously shattering and rebuilding, positioned himself at the distant observation post. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his camera, determined to capture this final moment, this goodbye, this liberation. "We're ready," Helen announced over the radio, opening the gates in 3, 2, 1. The metallic sound of the gate sliding open echoed in the clearing. Spirit, who had been watching everything with that vigilant calm that had always characterized him, didn't move immediately. He remained at the entrance of the enclosure, looking out at the open forest before him, then turning to look in the direction where he knew Michael was. It was a moment suspended in time. Man and wolf, connected by an invisible thread that transcended species, language, even time itself. A moment of perfect mutual understanding. A moment of gratitude. A moment of farewell. And then, with the fluid grace that always left Michael breathless, Spirit stepped forward. One step, then another. Finally, an elegant leap that carried him beyond the enclosure's boundaries to freedom, to his destiny. Michael continued photographing through the tears that blurred his vision, capturing the silver silhouette moving among the trees, paws touching the forest floor with increasing confidence, tail held high in a majestic arc. And then, like a ghost, Spirit disappeared into the density of the forest. Free, wild, home. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. Tracker data showed Spirit remaining on the periphery of the pack's territory, approaching and retreating, testing boundaries, negotiating his place in the complex social hierarchy of wolves. "This is exactly what we would expect from a new member," Helen explained during the daily update meetings. "He won't be instantly accepted as an equal. He has to prove his worth, find his position." Michael absorbed every piece of information like a thirsty man. Every report, every tracker data point, every rare sighting reported by field researchers. became part of his new daily ritual, a way to maintain the connection, even at a distance, a way to continue the shared journey, even if they now walked separate paths. The documentary about Spirit was completed and premiered at a major environmental film festival, receiving critical acclaim. The story of the lonely photographer and the abandoned wolf who saved each other touched hearts around the world, especially among older women who identified with the message of connection, renewed purpose, and the bittersweet beauty of loving, enough to let go. Michael, once a man who avoided the spotlight at all costs, found himself reluctantly in the center of attention. Invitations for speaking engagements began to arrive. Book proposals, requests to share his experience and the extraordinary photographs he had captured throughout that transformative journey. The news arrived 6 months after the release. A succinct email from Helen, usually so formal in her communications. He hunted with them yesterday, for the first time, as an equal, as part of the pack. Michael read and reread those simple words, feeling their profound meaning reverberating through his body, his mind, his soul. Spirit had succeeded. He had completed the transition. He had found his place. That night, sitting alone on the porch of the cabin that now felt simultaneously emptier and more filled with meaning than ever, Michael allowed himself to cry again. Not just tears of loss, although Spirit's absence still ached like a phantom limb, but tears of joy too, of accomplishment, of purpose fulfilled. Spring returned to the forest, bringing with it new life, new possibilities. Exactly 1 year after Spirit's release, Michael returned to the place where it had all begun, that moss-covered fallen log in that silent clearing, where he had found a trembling pup who would change his life forever. He set up his camera with careful reverence, framing the familiar scene with new eyes, eyes that had learned to see not just the superficial beauty of nature, but the deep interconnectedness of all living things. Eyes that had cried, that had marveled, that had witnessed simple and profound miracles. And as the sun set, casting golden rays through the trees, exactly as on that fateful day 2 years before, Michael captured his final image, not of a wolf, but of the place where a wolf had been born not just to life, but to transformation. The place where a man had been reborn too. He packed away his camera. He felt a peace he had never known before. The journey with Spirit had come to an end, but another was beginning. A journey of conservation, education, inspiration. A journey to tell stories that connected people with nature, that reminded everyone that, in the end, we are not so different from the wild creatures who share our world. And somewhere in the vastness of the forest, a blue-eyed wolf ran free, with his pack, under the silver light of the moon. Wild, complete, home. Some would say he was just a wolf, just an animal following his instincts. Michael knew better. He knew that some connections transcend explanation. Some stories echo long, after the words are gone. Some encounters change not just lives, but souls. Looking one last time at the clearing where it had all begun, Michael smiled and whispered words that the wind would carry far away, into the heart of the forest, to the ears of a spirit who had touched his soul and transformed his existence. Run free, my friend, run free.